You held perhaps the most unique position in sports, public address announcer, Chicago Cubs. So, growing up, did you know that was the role that you wanted to get into, and how did it come about?
Growing up, I knew I wanted to get into sports broadcasting if I could. That was my lifelong dream and goal is to be a broadcaster. Ever since the first time I heard Harry Carey as a kid growing up in the Chicago suburbs on WGN back in the day, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I was able to do it at the minor league level for a while, and in college, broadcast for the student radio station and then minor league baseball. And I did some PA in the minor leagues too. Public address is not something that I ever aspired to do, nor did I think I would ever necessarily end up doing it. I was really young when the Cubs were hiring for that position in 2011, and I applied. Um, just on a whim. There was almost 3,000 people that applied, and I kind of figured you don't have any chance, man. Like you're a 23-year-old kid, and I got hired. So that's kind of how it went down. But yes, getting into the sports broadcast announcing world was something that always interested me greatly and still does today.
So, you probably envisioned maybe being on TV or even in radio, maybe calling games or something, but not necessarily the PA guy, let alone for the Cubs at Wrigley Field.
Yeah, totally. Calling games in the booth, I still do it. I love to do it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's one of my favorite things. But yeah, I mean, to be able to do what I did for a team I grew up rooting for, it was crazy. I mean, really cool.
Yeah, no, that's the other thing. It's not just the fact that you got that job at the major league level before a team that you grew up as a fan watching. So that's really cool. And it's just, yeah, like you said, it's one of those things where like you or I or whoever could apply for something thinking like, what's the odds? And then you're the guy that gets that. It's just crazy. It's got to be kind of like a pinch me type of moment, right?
Oh, 100% will. And I mean, it's a good lesson. And not to sound cheesy or cliche, but you miss every opportunity that you don't take a chance on. So there you go. I mean, I was the last person that probably thought that I would have been the one hired for that job. And I was fortunate enough to spend 10 years there. So it is. It's funny how stuff works out.
I'm curious, like, what was the favorite name, if you had one, that you got to call on a regular basis? Because I can tell you which name always sticks out to me when I would hear it. But I was curious if you had a specific name, maybe that was your favorite to call or say all the time.
Yeah, for like a home team player. When I got hired, Soriano was still playing left field every day for the Cubs for a year or two. I loved doing Alfonso Soriano. Aramis Ramirez was still there at the time. I always loved him anyways. That was a fun one to say. Kind of into the championship years, I loved Rizzo,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I loved doing Javier Baez too. That was fun. That was fun for me.
Yeah, I was gonna say the Anthony Rizzo name, the way you would say it would always stick out. And I think I know the answer to this question, but what's your favorite game that sticks out that you were able to be there for?
There's a lot of them. I'm often asked about my first opening day. I love opening day always. Like opening day is, and being a Cubs fan, I mean, let's face it, for my lifetime, I'll be 35 in February. They have been bad for most of my lifetime. So opening day was always the fresh start, and it meant summer was coming and the Cubs were still in the race because it was opening day. I love it. My first opening day sticks out. It was a blur to me, but it sticks out. I think, my answer to this question is always, and this is true. I mean, the World Series was great, but what sticks out to me most is the NLCS clincher against the Dodgers with Kershaw pitching for LA. It was special twofold. Obviously, they punched their ticket to the World Series, which was amazing. Got to do it at home. My wife, who at the time we weren't married yet, and our oldest daughter were at the game, so it was a special kind of family sentimental thing for me because we got to celebrate together after. That one sticks out the most to me. It followed second, probably still not by World Series, is when they beat the Cardinals in 2015 in the division series. That was just nuts. Like they had arrived at that point. Those two really, really stick out to me.
Yeah, the opening day makes a lot of sense, but yeah, I actually did in my mind automatically assume it was going to be the Game 6 clincher against the LA Dodgers just because they won the pennant that night and everything. And of course, like you said, the World Series being able to do that is awesome and, iconic on many levels. That just sticks out to me the most among the sports. Opening day is just always like that kind of like a holiday to me.
100%. And what stinks here, though, is opening day weather is just atrocious. I mean, we had a
Mhm.
snow out in the ensuing years. It's if it's 40 degrees and sunny, you're doing great. Normally, it's raining, it's gloomy, it sucks. The weather's atrocious, but yeah, it's like you don't care because it's opening day.
Start of the day to the end of the day, what was your routine like?
I would do a lot of game prep or series prep before a new team came in, and I follow the league, obviously, still do. So I always had a pretty good beat on other teams' rosters and whatnot. But familiarize yourself with visiting teams mostly. That's all that can be done anywhere. But just the day to day would change in terms of pregame ceremonies and the like that we would possibly MC or have goings on the field. Other than that, the script and the routine stayed pretty much the same, almost to a point of monotony at times. But I try to get there, a couple 3 hours before the ball game, do my prep work because we would start our pregame a good hour and a half before first pitch, depending on the day. So it was almost like once the game starts, you kind of chill out a little bit because then you just have to worry about the game and all the extracurriculars are essentially finished, if that makes sense.
Yeah, did you have any, specific relationships maybe with any players or, of course, like Len and JD or any other figures maybe in and around Wrigley?
Yeah, I got to know Len and JD and Pat and Ron, and just from seeing them upstairs, really great guys I looked up to, kind of growing up and as a kid, as an aspiring broadcaster too, especially Pat Hughes and Len as well. I mean, I remember when he got hired by the Cubs when I was in high school, but yeah, I was fortunate enough to work a lot with Cubs Productions and some of the work they did and kind of host a little series that they called Catching Up. And we'd sit down with a lot of Cubs alumni at convention and other times throughout the year. And that was fun for me because I'm a baseball guy. I played, I had a very fledgling Division III career that didn't last very long, but I loved it. So to be able to pick the brains of former big leaguers and some Hall of Famers and, guys of that caliber, was awesome for me. So yeah, our paths would definitely cross, depending on the time of year or the function or the event. And I always enjoyed that greatly.
Obviously, you weren't the PA man last year, but did you attend any games as a fan?
I didn't. No, and it was honestly the first time that I hadn't been to Wrigley Field for a game and I don't know how long, probably well before I got hired because I feel like we always were at least making a trip a few times a year even before I worked there. So no, I did not go last year. I honestly checked out of baseball last year almost entirely. My interest level in it after 10 years of 81 games was I don't want to say it waned, but I just needed a break. So I didn't even follow the team nearly as closely or the league as I normally would have, and it was a really nice refresher.
Yeah, the opportunity to kinda take a break there, so I definitely get that.
Yeah, and I didn't obviously travel with the team or anything either. We would have events and functions when the team was out of town, so I'd be at the ballpark, still not every day, but from time to time. But yeah, I think a lot of people, and myself included, now that I'm not in it, you just take it for granted. Well, the Cubs are on every day or the Giants are on every day. But that baseball schedule, when you're in it, it's grueling to say the least. If you did it at minor league level like I did as well, it's a tough schedule.
Have you had a chance to maybe talk with the new PA man, Jeremiah Pabrocki?
I talked to Jeremiah before he got hired, and I spoke to him. I messaged him after he was hired to congratulate him. I met Jeremiah introduced himself to me when he was just a kid. He's still a kid, my God, but when he
Yeah.
was a younger kid at Wrigley, and I saw him and met him a few times there. Always such a great guy. I actually broadcast. I was a fill-in for a University of Illinois Chicago baseball game this spring on ESPN, and he did PA there and still does for some of their athletics, as far as I know. But anyway, long story short, saw him before he got hired, just a week or so before, and I told him, "Man, you are awesome. I always liked him. He's got a great voice, great approach. I think his style fits Wrigley so well." And I told him before he got hired, I said, I hope you're the guy, man, because you are a good fit. And lo and behold, a couple weeks later, there it is. So really, really happy for him. It's a really, really cool story.
Yeah, I think he's, what, 21, and the voice is booming, like, you wouldn't know by listening just how young he is, like you alluded to. I can just imagine the nerves if it was me doing it. Like, were you ever nervous doing games?
I think there was always I don't want to say nervous, but an edge maybe. Like if you lose the butterflies then you lose your edge. So it keeps you prepared. It keeps you on your toes. Maybe nerves in a good way, I guess, would be a good way to describe it. Not anxious to a fault, but just enough to know that you are live in a live setting with 40,000 people. So be on top of your game. Yeah, I always tell people this is there may be 40,000 people in the ballpark, but the only people that were looking at me were the ones on the rooftops across the street. The other 39,842 have their back to you. So it's not like being in a room with 100 people staring at you, giving
Yeah.
a speech, say, to your speech class in college or high school, which is a little more soothing than when you have 100 sets of eyeballs on you.
Not to, like, belittle any of it, but, like, it's kinda like part of that background sound at a baseball game, like, with the actual all the sounds going on, and even if, like, a PA man in general messed up a name or something, most likely people aren't even gonna notice, I would assume.
I think you hit it on the head, Will, and I don't think there's any disrespect there at all. A public address announcer should not essentially be talked about because you are part of the background, and I feel like if you are spoken about, you've done something wrong. I mean, that's just kind of how I always approached it. Funny you brought up Len Casper. I follow him on Twitter, and I saw the other night that he tweeted something, and I don't know what event he was watching, but something to the fact of PA announcers out there, you don't need to scream, we can hear you. And my God, I couldn't have said that. I lived by those words my entire PA career, wherever I was doing it. I cannot stand the over the top approach that a lot of guys have. And I'm not, you got to do what is good for you and what's good for the setting in which you work, but it was just never my style. Um, so when I saw him say that on Twitter, I didn't interact with it, but I thought to myself, you know what, Len, you are right on the money. I'm with you there.
You obviously have a World Series ring, so I can imagine that's among your prized possessions. Is it, like, locked up in a case somewhere in a
It
vault?
is. It is, and I do wear it once in a while, not much. It's fun to wear. I like to share it with people. Still, it's so cool for me to have that opportunity. I David Ross, before he was the Cubs manager, came to the booth to sing the stretch the night before we got our rings, but the players already had. I know he had retired at the time, but the players had already gotten their rings, so he came in with his ring, and I was gawking at it, and he flipped it to me in the booth, and I mean, my knees were knocking. I'm thinking,
Yeah.
holy cow, look at this ring. And then was fortunate enough to get one the next day, and I still don't feel like I deserve it. I was just along for the ride, man. But it was, yeah, I have a lot of memorabilia that I collect and always have and still do. But in terms of mementos, that is far and away, it takes the cake.
Oh, yeah, and yeah, those things have a nice little weight to them, they weigh a little bit.
Yeah, I mean it's a wrist workout for sure if you wear it out for the night. No, no question.
So is that why you decided to leave the role?
It is. Yeah, it was something to me that had run its course. I needed something different. I really, really, really wanted to get back into broadcasting, and that's where I've turned my attention to. The PA role was great. To me, it just got monotonous after 10 years, and it was a position that essentially doesn't let you use any creative talent, which is no knock on anything. It's just that's what the position is. I mean, you read what's on the script, and that's what a public address announcer does, and that's phenomenal. But for me, after 800 games and 10 years, it was time for a change and to kind of re-pursue the dream I always had as a kid. But it was an amazing 10-year pit stop, if I can call it that. I mean,
Yeah.
it was just it couldn't have been any better.
Yeah, no, I get that. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I can't imagine like that was a really cool job that you were able to do, and now, like you said, now it's time for something new. I know, obviously, you're doing the Locked On Cubs podcast, and are there other endeavors that you're kind of interested or doing right now in addition to the podcast?
Well, last summer was awesome for me. Spring, summer, fall. I got to go back and broadcast. Did a lot of local colleges and universities, basketball, and baseball. Did a lot of freebie work with a lot of minor league teams in the area. But I loved every second of it because I was in the booth again calling games. And I really, really love that. The lockdown thing, totally out of left field. I'll be honest with you. I don't listen to podcasts. I never have. Never hosted a podcast. I've been on a few. So this was Curveball City for me. But when they reached out, really awesome network. And I am super pumped about it. And yeah, it's been a couple weeks only, but it's been a ton of fun, something totally new, a lot of creative ability for input and what you're going to discuss. And it lets you really analyze and dissect the game and the teams. And and that's what I love. So yeah, it's been a really cool new venture so far.
Was it different for you to kinda start doing a podcast, trying to think of whether it's topics, content, and especially now with the baseball lockout, because 'cause isn't Locked On an everyday podcast, so
You got it, man. Yeah,
yeah.
I joke with my wife. I said, "Man, hell of a time I picked to start this, right? MLB's locked out. There's no games to talk about, and I've never done this before, so good luck with content." But no, I mean, yeah, it's a daily, but it's quick. It's quick hits, which I like, because
Yeah.
I have a short attention span too. So,
Yeah.
you're doing a 15, 20, 25-minute show, at the most, and, just Monday through Friday. We'll scale down here coming towards the end of this month, to maybe 2 or 3 a week until
Mhm.
hopefully spring
Gotcha.
training ramps up. When pitchers and catchers hopefully report if they can
Mhm.
hash out their differences middle of February. So we'll be on kind of the skeleton schedule until then. But yeah, it's a challenge at times to find content that I am interested in, that I hope the listener will be interested in as well. But being able to have that ability to input, and kind of decide what goes where, I really like, and that's been one of my favorite parts so far of doing Locked On.
You might have picked the right time to maybe, change career paths only because, you saw the best of the Cubs had to offer, and now they're kinda reloading, so what do you think about the Cubs as a group right now? What do you think about this team right now as they try to reload and go forward?
It's a really good question, Will. I think that a lot of people forget last year in the middle of June, this was a team that was 10 games over 500. They were 38-28, and they had a really good back half of the bullpen with Andrew Chafin and Ryan Tepera and Craig Kimbrell, all three pieces which were part of those trades you alluded to. And then the big three left, obviously, not by choice, but Rizzo and Bryant and Baez traded away. Um, I think with that said, there's a lot more here than a lot of people or a lot of Cubs fans are very hard on this team in this city, and so is the media may realize. The Wade Miley deal to beef up the rotation, claiming him off waivers from Cincinnati, I think is going to really, really be one of the better Jed moves when it's all said and done for him, even if it's for a year or two. When we look back, but the Stroman thing, I mean, I'm not going to say that was out of left field, but it surprised the you know
Yeah.
what out of me, and man, I was pumped. I mean, that's a big deal, and I don't think they're done. I mean, Jed had said there was a commitment to spending some money. They still have, in baseball dollars, very few, committed to their team in terms of player salaries for next year. So there's still money there to be spent. And when lockout is lifted, I think there's going to be more, that they do. Hopefully, maybe at the shortstop position. But yeah, that's one of the things we're actually doing on Locked On Cubs now, is kind of taking an in-depth look at each position group day by day, and we've gotten through the starting rotation of the bullpen, and you know what, Will, I think there's a lot more here than meets the eye, and I think that you bring in a couple more pieces that they need, and you get some guys that play at their potential or above, and this is suddenly a team that is going to turn some heads next year.
And then, of course, Stroman was trying to recruit Correa right then on Twitter. So, talk about timing. Not to say that if there wasn't a lockout that he was going to sign the next day or anything, but it kind of sucks just because, I know that just because they're in lockout, that doesn't mean Correa was ready to sign anyway. It doesn't mean that he's not still buddy buddy with Stroman and he's like, yeah, I want to go to Chicago in 3 months and I'll be there. It could still play out however it's going to play out, but it just seemed kind of like crappy timing because it was like things were happening. We were seeing a lot of moves. We don't see baseball free agent signings usually happen until, December, maybe more so January and so on. And obviously the lockout spurred that. But I mean, the way it was going, who's to say it wouldn't have happened sooner than later?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I mean, you're right. It was a windfall of moves. Look what the Mets did. They were out there signing everybody. They were throwing checks around.
Yeah.
And yeah, the timing, I mean, there's never good timing, I suppose, but the timing did stink. And the Cubs snuck that Stroman deal right in there at the final hour, and And I do. I think they'll pick up kind of where they left off in terms of piecing things together when it is finally lifted, and hopefully that's sooner rather than later.
When do you think the lockout might end? Hopefully before spring training, like you were saying before.
Yeah, I was talking about this the other day with a couple fans, and just my opinion. I wanted to hear theirs too. I'd be curious what you think, but I mean, it's carry over to the first of the year for sure. I could see this resolving sometime end of January, maybe. I mean, if it were sooner, I'd be surprised, but maybe that's just me being a pessimist. I don't
Yeah.
think that we're going to lose anything from this. That's just my personal opinion. You know how that kind of goes when things ramp up and it comes to a head like it did, and then a lockout like this occurs, you see the both parties kind of back off, and there's a little bit of a hiatus for a while in terms of discussion before it heats up again. So, with the holidays coming up, I think that we will have a very clear picture on where we're headed as a game come first couple weeks of January, and hopefully that means a resolution at or near that time.
Yeah, I hope so too. I guess I'm not too worried about it right now just because it is the off season and as long as they do get it done figured out before spring training, it's kind of like okay, whatever, it's the off season anyway, but because it's a lockout and we just don't know how long it could go. I mean, look at last year, but the whole COVID shortened season, it almost felt like they weren't even going to figure that out until they did in what late July. So it's just hard to know with the way the commissioner side of things and the owners or the players try to negotiate and kind of any kind of agreement or whatever. So hopefully they can wrap it up sooner than later.
Yeah, I mean, you try to look at the silver lining, I suppose, and like you said, doing this now rather than February 15th is good. I mean, it's a backhanded proactive approach, right? So, like you said, it gives you plenty of calendar time to hash things out to not lose, any spring training action or at least camp wise. So we'll see what happens. I got a good feeling about it, but middle of January, I think we'll have a clear picture of where everybody stands.
Do you like the changes that they were making with the like the extra inning rule and like with the man on second and maybe having a DH in both leagues and I don't know. I'm trying to think of some of the other things that baseball's been doing, but
No,
where do you come off?
no, I
Yeah.
don't. In all
Yeah.
honesty, I don't. I get a lot of flack from my wife. I'm an 80-year-old stuck in a 34-year-old's body, mentally, not physically, I hope, but mentally. I'm a purist. I understand, it's a business, and fans have to understand that too, because that's just the nature of the beast now, and it's a big business. Let's be honest. But no, I don't like it. I like the I like the I like pitchers that hit. I like the strategy that you have to implement as a manager in the National League, having a pitcher in the lineup, whether he's a good hitter or not. Uh, I don't like, having the winning run 180 feet away before anybody even comes to the plate in extra innings. I think it's cheap. I just it's fun and gimmicky if you're playing in the backyard with your buddies, but not at the major league level. I just don't care for it. But hey, I mean, we're not paid to make those decisions. We're just paid to be there to talk about them, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
So no, to answer your question, I don't love a lot of the changes that have gone on. Now, with that said, I do like some of them. They're not really enforced all that well, but the pitch clock and
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
the minimum batter rule out of the pen, that's not a bad thing, I suppose, because the pace of
Yeah.
play more often than not, I feel like in games in this day and age is atrocious. So if you can do things that are really going to combat that, well, that's a good thing. But on the whole, I am a purist, and I just the old curmudgeon that like things the way they were.
But I used to think about it with, like, the 2016 playoffs, watching the Cubs playoff games every day. I know those games were 3.5, probably 4+ hours on most nights, and at least for me as a fan, I'm thinking, like, whatever they have to like, whatever Joe Madden had to do to win that game, I'm all for, but I do get it, even whether you're a fan of it or an invested fan of a specific team or you're just a baseball fan like me watching the World Series this past year, and it's like, okay, I'm not a Braves fan, I'm not an Astros fan, I like baseball, but I don't have to watch this entire 4-hour game if it's not really my team, so I get that time issue.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, it's like when you're at home, you can flip the channel, but when you're there, you can't. Going back to your point about making these changes, whether you like them or not, here's the good news: the league recognized that changes need to be made, so they try something and implement it and see if it works, and maybe it doesn't. So you have to give them credit for that, and I love that. I mean, it's a positive, proactive approach. Let's see what we can do to fix the so-called issues that we have. So the proactivity in that aspect, whether we agree with some of the things that they decided to do or will decide to do or not, I like to see him take that approach at least.
You were kind of talking about it before about on the podcast, I believe, about Sammy Sosa and whether or not maybe he would, have a chance at the Hall of Fame. So where do you come off on Sosa and just the whole Hall of Fame candidacy with him?
Man, it's great conversation, right? I mean, I'd love to know where you stand on these guys too. And I'm biased. Like we're the same age. I grew up here. Sammy was Sammy when I was a kid. He was like our hero. I mean, I
Yeah,
was 10 years old. He's belting home runs every swing. It's like this guy is a god.
yeah,
I understand what happened after he stopped playing and how all that went down. And I guess the where do you draw the line, I guess, with
hmm
some of the guys who are in already and some of the guys who now are going to be off the ballot, Sammy included, after this year, because he's not going to get voted in this year. I would venture to say not.
right.
Where do you draw the line? I don't know. If you look at the numbers, were they aided by what he did? Yeah, I guess so. Was he a Hall of Fame player just solely by the numbers? Absolutely. Here's what's frustrating to me too. You talk about Sammy and you talk about guys like Barry Bonds. You can lump them in that same group. Like if they in fact did, use performance enhancing drugs, which we know that they did, they were great players before that as well. I mean, when early in Bond's career with Pittsburgh, he was awesome, right? So
Yeah,
it's a shame that's the route those guys took because
yeah,
now it's tainted them in a lot of people's minds forever. But they were awesome players before. I mean, Sammy was a speedster, right? Always had that cannon arm, stole 25, 30 bases a year, just kind of a wiry, not bulky dude, but good ball player. So it's unfortunate how it went down. Is he a Hall of Famer? I don't know. Will he be a Hall of Famer? No, unfortunately. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but the soft spot in me as a Chicago kid that grew up in the 90s here, loving him, it stings a little bit.
I think a lot of people, for the most part, would like to see Sosa back at Wrigley, and I guess that's a Ricketts thing in terms of why he hasn't been back yet. But are you surprised that it hasn't happened yet?
I would be front row center. I mean, Hall of Fame or not, I know for a fact there would be 40,000 people on their feet if Sosa was back at Wrigley Field to throw out a first pitch or to sing the stretch, whatever it may be. Yeah, Ricketts and company have said that they feel he owes the organization an apology before he'll be welcomed back. That's they're free to feel however they wish to feel, and that's something that they would obviously have to get, I guess, to welcome him back. But yeah, he should be welcomed back, no question. And I know the fans would love it, and it would just be really cool because regardless of what you think of a guy like that, what he meant for the game of baseball at a time when it needed him so badly is immeasurable after the strike in 94. And he had this city turned upside down, man. I mean, so yeah, it would
Yeah.
be for me. And I think 9 out of 10 Cubs fans would probably feel the same way to have him back here, at a convention or at the ballpark would just be wow,
The whole steroid thing in general, whether or not he did or, was ever officially proven guilty of it, the way I look at it now is Bud Selig, who was the commissioner back then, is in the Hall of Fame. So it's like they probably should put these guys in the Hall of Fame.
It's a great point. Well, I mean, it's a really good point. And I don't understand personally how you get some of these guys from that era who garner 30, 40, 50% of the Hall of Fame vote. Then you guys got some guys that get 6, 8, 10%. Like, what's the difference? I don't know. It's a weird debate. It's a weird topic. It's unfortunate that the game had to be put in that position,
Yeah.
when you're talking about some of these greats that will go down in history for good and bad in terms of baseball lore. But yeah, it's a frustrating thing. Whether or not you know Sosa ever finds his way to Cooperstown, I don't think he will unless he buys a ticket to go in and look at the
Yeah.
museum. Having him back at Wrigley as a Cub fan would be awesome.